Mother was smiling brightly. That meant Ilara should smile as well. She had learned that much. Mother was angry at father. That meant she should frown just like Mother was doing. She had learned that much. Mother was disciplining one of the ladies in waiting. That meant she should simply stand by and not do anything. She knew that. Then Mother was looking at her, watching her very closely. There was nothing she could do but rise to the challenge. She would laugh when her mother laughed and grieve when she grieved. Then her mother wouldn't be angry. A smile would come over her face and she would not grow uglier. When she was about 5 years old, rouge was applied to her lips. By the time she was 10, face whitening powder was put on her cheeks. Her eyebrows had been plucked and false ones were drawn on. She felt like she was wearing a mask. It was as if invisible strings were connected to her arms and legs and Mother was pulling them. She was hemmed in on every side. She could accept that. She was perfectly willing to be a puppet all her life, but that was a mistake. It did not matter if she wore a mask or if she made herself a puppet. Mother kept getting uglier and uglier. She discovered it was impossible to stop it. It had all been for nothing, but by the time she realized that, it was too late. Too late to do anything at all. Chapter 1: The Bath. I wonder if there is anywhere I can get a decent job, Zyrolan said as she sorted the laundry in the basket. They were in the usual laundry area, and one of the eunuchs had given her a load of dry clothes. Tell me, Maomao, do you have any connections? Zyrolan was nearing the end of her 6-month contract. Usually around this time, the families of palace women would find potential marriages for them. Or else, the women would find matches for themselves. Or a higher-ranking palace woman or a consort who particularly liked them might ask to have them kept on at the rear palace. Connections, huh? Maomao said. She did have connections of a sort. The verdigris house was always looking for hard-working and attractive young women. Especially ones as good-natured as Zyrolan. Maomao put a hand to her chin and looked at Zyrolan. She still had traces of baby fat, but she had a good face. Certain men would appreciate the way she occasionally stumbled over her words. She was earnest above all else, and that quality would take her far. The old madam said girls with that quality were easy to train. She often bought them from the procurers, which meant the traffickers. Maomao quailed at the thought. If you absolutely positively can't find any other job, then I'll make some introductions. To be perfectly honest, though, she didn't want to. What, you'd really do that for me? Zyrolan leaned toward Maomao, her eyes sparkling. Maomao looked away. She was afraid Zyrolan was getting her hopes up. In Maomao's mind, she was a last resort. She knew the pleasure quarter and its courtesans well. This prevented her from wholeheartedly recommending it as a career. The verdigris house where Maomao lived was one of the brothels that treated its women relatively well. However, generally the pleasure quarter was not a place where one could hope to work and survive into old age. Chronic sleep deprivation and malnutrition often ended a courtesan's life early. The diseases customers carried also contributed. Some courtesans tried to leave the palace but failed. They were then stuffed into a bamboo mat and thrown into the river as an example to others. Zyrolan had been sold into the rear palace by her parents. When she left, she would have to make her own way. It was understandable how that might produce some anxiety or drive her to start asking around about connections. Maomao asked herself if she was sure she didn't have anything better to do. It crossed her mind to recommend her to Jinshi, but then she shook her head. Introducing her to him would only get Zyrolan caught up in who knew what kind of trouble. Maybe the quack doctor then. She crossed her arms and grunted. Then suddenly a face appeared. What's up? The speaker was a tall young woman with a unique hairdo and a distinctly non-courtly speaking style. It was Shisui. Oh, Shisui, say you wouldn't happen to know a good place to work, would you? They say a drowning woman will clutch at any straw, and Zyrolan was doing exactly that. Shisui was a maid, so her position was quite similar to Zyrolan's. The chances of getting a useful lead from her seemed slim, but Shisui said something unexpected. You know, I think I just might. What, really? Zyrolan almost grabbed onto Shisui. The other girl looked to the side and pointed toward the center of the rear palace's southern quarter. A large, low building stood there. Maomao was well acquainted with it. It was the great bathhouse. The bathhouse had been built during the expansion of the rear palace, imitating the harems of a nation far to the west. She said, well, It's not so much that I know one right now. But I think I know how we can get one, Shisui said and grinned. The building was huge. The bathing area in general was big enough for 1,000 people, with a tub large enough for 100. There were 3 main bathing areas. A small chamber with an attached outdoor bath was for the consorts. A second larger bath was where the trio was standing now. The third, biggest bath was where the maids usually took quick dips. With a population as dense as that of the rear palace, it was all too easy for an illness to turn into an epidemic. Therefore, sanitation was paramount. This bath was part of maintaining cleanliness. In the wider world, a bath usually meant simply washing one's body. People did not get in a tub. Instead, they filled a bucket with water and washed with it, or wiped themselves down with a wet rag. In the pleasure quarter where Maomao had grown up, bathing in tubs was common. However, many of the women who served at the rear palace did not even know how to use them when they first arrived. Filling a tub with hot water was a great luxury. In winter, palace women were expected to bathe once every 5 days. In summer, they were expected to bathe once every other day. Washing away dust and body odor was all part of making life at the rear palace pleasant, Maomao thought. It was also a chance to see if any of the consorts were subjecting the serving women to corporal punishment. It was much like how at the Verdigris house, the madam kept a close eye on the women. She wanted to make sure none of the customers were abusing them or damaging the merchandise. The bathhouse itself could be a vector for spreading illness. However, in this garden of women, sexually transmitted diseases were rare. Most of the inhabitants were young and healthy, so serious contamination was unusual. I knew we'd have the place to ourselves this time of day, Shisui said. It was still light outside and not many other palace women were present. But why the bathhouse? Zyrolan asked. She held a washcloth in her hand and wore only a bathing apron. The apron left the curves of her body clearly visible, though there were not many of them. Shisui was dressed the same way. Her body was very developed compared to how youthful her face looked. Her chest was large enough to make Maomao's fingers flex unconsciously. Apparently Shisui dressed to hide her proportions. Shisui herself grinned broadly and jumped into the bath. Hey, you have to rinse first, they'll get mad at you, Zyrolan cried. Yipes, it's hot. Shisui yelped even as she pulled off her apron. Her skin was turning red where she had plunged in. Maomao grabbed a bucket and brought some water from the cold water bath. Zyrolan sniffed annoyed. HMPH, have you never bathed at this time of day? The eunuchs only filled the tubs once a day. They started with extremely hot water, and over time it cooled down to the perfect temperature. During the warm season like this, not many people were eager to hop in the bath immediately after it was filled. But later the bathhouse became crowded, so those who wanted an early bath were allowed to enter. That is why Maomao and the others could be there now. He, I always arrive a little later, Shisui said. Maomao mixed cold and hot water in her bucket, then began to wet herself down. She used some shampoo she had taken from the medical office. As it bubbled, she wetted her hair and worked her fingers carefully along her scalp. Let me have some of that, Maomao, Shisui said and stuck out her hand. Maomao obligingly poured a bit of the shampoo from its bottle into her palm. Her own head still covered in suds, Maomao poured some of the water from the bucket over Zyrolan's head and washed her hair with the shampoo as well. It stings my eyes, Zyrolan said, then closed them. She worked her fingers over Zyrolan's scalp, getting a good lather going, then washed the bubbles away with more water. Zyrolan shook her head like a dog shaking itself dry. She flung suds into Maomao's face. I'm not a big fan of baths, she said. No, but they feel good, Shisui said. I agree, Maomao responded. She sought out a comparatively cool place in the tub and dipped her toes into the water. She worried the heat would make her feel dizzy. She added more cold water to her bucket and used it to keep her face cool while she soaked. Shisui slid into the tub just like Maomao did. Zyrolan got into the cold bath. She was likely more comfortable there. Farming villages like her hometown usually did not have a custom of bathing in hot water. Zyrolan rested her arm on the edge of the tub and looked over at the other girls. How is this supposed to be a connection to anything? Just look over there. Shisui pointed to the outdoor bath, which was usually for the more important women of the rear palace consorts and higher-ranking ladies in waiting. It was attached to the small chamber reserved for the consort's use. "What's over there?" Zyrolan asked. Shisui got up, took Zyrolan by the arm and dragged her outside. She guided her over to a stone platform beside the outdoor bath. "Hold on, are we even allowed to be out here?" Zyrolan asked, a little panicked. But Shisui only grinned, stood by the platform and tied a hand towel around her head. "Well now." Maomao thought. She believed she understood what Shisui intended. She joined the others near the platform and tied a towel around Zyrolan's head. Zyrolan still seemed confused. Soon 2 women approached them. One of them asked, "Are you new here?" It was easy to guess she was a consort, judging by her haughty tone. Shisui just smiled and said, "Yes, ma'am." Then the consort lay down on the stone platform as if it were the most natural thing in the world. The other woman, evidently her lady-in-waiting, produced a bottle of perfume oil. "Good and firm, please," the consort said. "You've got it," Shisui replied, taking the perfume oil and slowly pouring it over the consort's shoulders. "A little to the right," the woman said slowly. Her lady-in-waiting stood nearby, looking bored. Maomao thought that she probably doubted she had been with the emperor. She took some of the oil and rubbed it into the woman's legs and feet, trying her best to imitate Shisui. Zyrolan did the same. When a woman had been the emperor's bedmate, she often became the target of harassment from the other consorts and palace women. She would learn to be vigilant. No one in that position would let an unknown serving girl give her a massage. This woman was lying on the table, spread out like an octopus. She possessed a certain beauty, as all consorts must. However, Maomao noticed her skin looked a bit abused. There were marks where her fine hair had been plucked. That really bothered Maomao. How could it not, considering she had been raised in the pleasure quarter? On impulse, she ducked back into the building, looking for something. "What's that?" Zyrolan asked quietly when she returned. Maomao was holding a thread about 60 centimeters long. "You will see," Maomao said. Then she struck up a conversation with the consort's lady-in-waiting. The other woman looked a little suspicious, but she listened. Finally, she sat down on the edge of the stone platform and held out her arm. Maomao ran the thread along it. The surface of the thread caught her hair and pulled it out. "Does it hurt too much?" Maomao asked. "It is pretty uncomfortable, but it is certainly better than a dull razor." The other woman seemed like a decent lady-in-waiting. Usually this sort of thing was done after a good thorough cleaning, but the women looked like they had already been in the bath, so it should be fine. Maomao said, "I will stop if it seems to be irritating your skin." She decided to start with just one arm. After carefully removing all the hair, she covered the limb generously in perfume oil. It was a good perfume, modestly scented, and it did not assault the nose. Let us see how it goes for now. "When will you be around next?" the lady-in-waiting asked. She glanced at her mistress, who was melting on the stone table. "When would you like? Say the day after next, maybe." Shisui grinned at that. Zyrolan was working on the woman's thighs, still not quite sure what was going on. "I see what she's going for," Maomao thought. If they lacked connections, they could easily create some. The bathhouse was an important place, where they could meet consorts they could not normally approach. By the time a satisfied consort and her attendant departed, the next customer for their massage service was already waiting. Working as a bathhouse attendant was tiring work. Massaging someone's entire body required a lot of effort. It would not have been so bad if they were only doing one person. However, a line quickly formed. They eventually discovered that the lady who previously gave massages here had just finished her contract. One of the middle consorts had taken a liking to her. Now she was employed in the woman's family home. In the wider world, bathhouse attendants were often treated as prostitutes. However, there were only women here, so it wasn't an issue. Many of the palace women did not like doing this job, perhaps because of the association with it, or perhaps simply because it was physical labor. Because of this, Maomao, Shisui and Zyrolan became the women everyone chose for massages. This meant they had more work to do. After all, Maomao and the others were supposed to be handling the laundry, but it brought its benefits. "Here, have this." "It isn't much, but take it," a lady-in-waiting said as she got out of the bath. She discreetly passed them a small fabric pouch. This didn't happen every time, of course. This particular woman seemed to have appreciated the hair removal, that was all. When they peeked inside, they found candy. That made Zyrolan's eyes sparkle, and she promptly popped a piece into her mouth. Ah, bliss! She could achieve bliss just by having something sweet to eat. What a lucky girl! The three of them had finished their work in the baths and were perched on the railing out front, cooling off. The sun was still high in the sky. It was a bit early for dinner. Other women were rushing around, trying to finish their work before sundown. The women tasked with cooking the food looked especially busy. Maomao was something of a special case. For Zyrolan and Shisui, the compromise of getting to the bath early was having more work left to do later. They were enjoying a few precious moments of relaxation before they got back to their jobs. I guess it's not that easy to make connections, Zyrolan said, rolling the candy around in her mouth. Perhaps she had been expecting more job offers by now. Oh, it is not so bad, Shisui said. When your contract is about to run out, simply find one of the consorts who likes you and whisper in her ear. Tell her your service will be ending soon. I hope it will work. Even if she does not take you on personally, you might at least be able to get your contract extended. And even if that does not happen, Shisui took something from the folds of her robe. It was a comb missing several teeth. Even though it wasn't perfect, the turtle shell piece was likely worth a good amount of money. You can always sell something like this for cash. Ho, Maomao thought she was very clever. She didn't really like sweet things and had already given her candy to Zyrolan. And speaking of cleverness, the word also described the consort Maomao served. Maomao went to the baths once every 2 days. She always seemed to be in the company of Shisui and Zyrolan. Many women might have frowned on her paying so much attention to other consorts. Consort Gyukai simply said, "Oh, you hear lots of interesting things in a place like that. Let me know what you learn." She was unflappable. It was true that consorts and ladies in waiting often spoke offhandedly about things of great interest when they were really relaxed. Perhaps they did not realize Maomao was a lady in waiting at the Jade Pavilion, or maybe the steam from the hot baths obscured her, making it hard to tell. Whatever the case, people spoke to her about their family's business situations. They also spoke of the behind-the-scenes goings-on of other consorts and other secrets. There were rumors about consort Gyukai as well. Maomao realized the sharpest consorts had guessed she was pregnant long ago. Now all the talk was about whether it would be a boy or a girl, and when it would be born. Some gossip held that consort Lihua might also be pregnant. Maomao was unsettled to realize people were already thinking along those lines, but there were still other rumors. Some said that consort Lulan might be with child. She had been known for her gaudy outfits ever since she arrived at the rear palace. Recently she had started to favor billowing clothes and seemed to avoid going outside. Both of these things fueled the stories. Consort Lulan had arrived at the beginning of this year, and now they were already at the end of the 8th month, going into the 9th. It seemed unbelievable that His Majesty would not have visited Lulan. She was a high consort who had arrived with such fanfare. If the rumors were correct, it would mean that 3 of the 4 upper consorts were pregnant. Was this happy news? Or were these tidings of trouble? Either way, it was an unsettling prospect, and there was yet another interesting story going around. I thought making eunuchs wasn't allowed anymore. Maomao knew what Zyrolan was getting at. Alongside the new palace ladies who had been taken on recently, the number of eunuchs had increased as well. But the creation of new eunuchs was supposed to have been outlawed when the current emperor had taken the throne. They are former slaves, Shisui said blandly. Slavery had also been outlawed, so these men were likely not slaves from Maomao's country. Some of the tribes captured people from the surrounding nations, castrated them, and then made them slaves. These new arrivals must have either run away or been rescued. They say there are 30 of them. With a number that big, there must have been a pretty serious move against the tribes. When slaves escaped, there was usually some impetus behind it. Maomao recalled there had been some issue with an expedition the year before. Perhaps the men had been rescued then. Shisui looked and sounded youthful. She also had a strange fondness for bugs, but she could be surprisingly worldly. "That's rough," Zyrolan remarked. "You said it," Shisui replied. They sounded as if it hardly concerned them. Then again, it hardly did. Zyrolan then said, "You know, they say one of the eunuchs is awfully cool. I would really like to get a look at him." That sounded all too familiar to Maomao, who scowled. "We are talking about a eunuch, remember? Are you still interested?" Shisui asked. But cool is cool, right? Oh, maybe he will be assigned to bring the water for the baths. Xiaolan's eyes were positively sparkling. It didn't seem to matter to her whether this man possessed that most important of possessions. She was still very young. I'm still interested, Xiaolan added, even if he isn't as great as Master Jinchi. Maomao almost fell completely off the railing she was leaning against. Are you okay? Xiaolan asked, peering at her. Maomao brushed off her skirt and straightened up again, pretending it was nothing. Come to think of it, Maomao, you and Master Jinchi are always running errands for the consort, yes. Maomao said this forcefully, communicating that it was nothing more and nothing less. Unconsciously, she brushed at her skirt with her left hand.